Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you.
You can tell he does this a lot because he's really good at it. Like really very good at it.
He's like the person who works at the restaurant who remembers all the specials and doesn't have to
Right?
read.
Right. And I have to tell you, as somebody who has never actually worked in food service, like never, not even a little
Mhm.
bit, that always feels like magic to me.
Yeah.
Like in my mind, I know that it is simply practice, but my heart says, is it magic?
I mean, accept the magic, right?
Yes, just accept. That's what I need to do is just accept the magic. Which, first of all, Julia, thank you so much for being here with me tonight. I cannot wait.
Oh my gosh, thank you for being here with me. And I only wish you were sitting on the other side of this kitchen counter and we could do this in person. But I'm very grateful we can be safe in where we are and everyone can do that from wherever they are. So thank you for being here. This really means a lot to me.
Oh my God, now I miss you even more. Let's go into these questions. So, I got the book. I was already super excited about the book. And then I got the book and I got to flip
Mhm.
through it a few weeks before we had this conversation. And what I realized very quickly was that you had finished this book essentially before the pandemic began.
Mhm.
And somehow you had also written a cookbook that was kind of perfect for the pandemic. And I say that because I mean, not only are the recipes like, obviously like pretty easy, like as somebody who does not have a super strong background in cooking, I felt like I could understand what was happening. I felt like I understood what to do, but it also tastes good and it didn't feel terrible to my body, which
Mhm.
is a really hard balance to strike sometime at home. So like what's going on with your foresight, girl? Like what's the visionary part of you? How did you know we would need this?
I mean, I obviously had no idea when I started working on the book what would be happening as I put it out. I hoped we would be sitting on those stools in Books Are Magic next to each other in a room full of people. I didn't know you had moved to Indianapolis, which I'm so glad you did. I think they're happy to have you home. Yeah, I really had no idea what the atmosphere would be at the time of publication, which is true of any book you write. It takes time for it to come out and things change over time, even though you put something in print. But I really appreciate everything you said and how the book has landed with you. I mean, that feels like my mission has been accomplished. Like everything you described is what my goal was, for readers to feel like, for you to feel like you can make everything in this book. You want to make a lot of things in the book. It's going to make you feel good. It's going to feel easy to make, but also make you feel good when you eat it. And really tap into all the different ways we can feel good. Like, what does that even mean? Um, and I think that's what we want all the time, right? So
Right.
I think, I basically am not, I can't predict anything. I'm not an oracle of any sort. I had no idea, but I do think the things in this book are things that are always needed and always welcome. I just think right now we need a lot of these things more than ever. And I think a lot of us are welcoming these things. And by these things, I just mean easy recipes and just kind of like honest reflections and pictures of dogs. We need these things.
Yes. Yes. Speaking of, how are Hope and Winky?
Oh, I basically just asked you to ask me that, right?
Yeah, I want to know. But I want to know. I was
They
like, it's
are.
already on my list. I swear I was going to wait until later, but you gave me my in.
Well, I appreciate that. Usually I just turn so red. Hope
Yes.
and Winky, who are my dogs, that's who we're talking about. They are my dogs. They are our dogs, our being Grace, my wife, and I. Our dogs are great. We're so grateful for them. I often look at them and just try and remember or just imagine what it might be like to be going through this time as a dog. Like, I know that sounds really silly, but like just to think about what would it feel like to not know what COVID is? What would it feel like to not know what an election is? Like all these kinds of things. So they offer me that perspective. And my new favorite way to kind of relax is like breathing stuff and meditation stuff. Like my favorite thing to do is I stare at our dogs when they're sleeping, which is creepy, but whatever. We all do it if you have a dog.
I
And
do
then
it. I do
I try
it.
to I try to match their breathing. like,
Mm,
because they are just so intuitive, and I just try to
yes.
match it, and it just like immediately calms me. So I could talk about this for the entire time. I'll cut myself off, but they're great. Thank you for asking them. Thank you for asking about them. And how is Astro and how is Kelly? You
Astro
saw
is
what order I just
fantastic.
asked.
I mean, I didn't even notice. I didn't even ask about Grace yet, who I know in real life and really love. So, like,
She's
there
with
you
the
go.
dogs right now. She's keeping them quiet so they don't bark.
That's
So
what Kelly's doing. Kelly has taken Astro away so that I can engage in a conversation about
amazing.
a cookbook and not Astro. Oh my, I have definitely derailed the situation here. This is the kind of thing.
That's on me. That's my fault. I'm sorry.
um,
Back to food.
Speaking of our dogs and spouses and friendship, what are some of the things that you can't wait to make for people when we're able to gather
Mm,
again? You know, because I keep thinking about that, how much like now that I've been inside and actually getting a little better at this cooking thing,
hmm.
I want to cook more for people
Yeah.
and for my friends and family. And like, I want people to come over and have a big pot of something that we all pass around. And I don't know that I've felt like that before. Like, I really wanted to sit around
Hmm.
a table and eat with people.
Yeah.
So, what do you want to make
Um,
for us? Is what I'm
yeah.
asking.
I love that question so much, and it makes me feel hopeful. I've been cooking this whole time, as so many people are, more than ever, and been giving a lot of food away, especially when it came time to take the pictures for the book and stuff. It was just a lot of food. So I've left a lot of containers on a lot of like kitchen porches. But in terms of having people around my table, like, yeah, if you and Kelly were visiting, like, what would I make for you? I mean, I guess that would start with asking you what you're in the mood for. But there's a whole chapter of soups and stews in this book.
Hmm.
And I'm a big fan of like a big pot of something on the stove, like a loaf of bread, like some kind of good salad, and like a pie is just waiting there for us for when it's done, or a cake, or maybe both, like, so you don't have to choose.
But
And yeah,
here's both.
that would feel good. So I think also it's a little cold right now, so I'm thinking about soup. I'm also wearing a t-shirt and shorts because I'm inside and we're on Zoom and it's weird, but whatever.
I understand. I understand. It's warmer than it had been here.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's actually been kind of nice. I know we're in a full spring, but I like the way it feels. Um, one of the things that I really liked about this book um, was that as much of your work as I have consumed, I feel like when I'm around you, and I think this is probably true for most people, you know, when it comes to people who put some of their personal life into their writing.
Hmm.
Um, but you traditionally haven't done a lot of that. There hasn't
Hmm.
been a ton of like, there's been experiences of yours, and there's been, recipes inspired by elements of your life. But this
Hmm.
is the first time I really got to read about your life and
Hmm.
the way you see the world, um, almost in the same way that I sometimes write about, myself and the world, which can be really vulnerable. I know,
Yeah,
just like it is such a thing to put yourself
yeah.
out there in a way where you try to communicate your humanity to other people's humanity in a really vulnerable way. And I feel like you did a phenomenal job.
Mm.
But I keep wondering, like, wow, like what made her feel like now is the
Mm.
time that I really want to be able to connect this way? Because that's also something that made me think that this was kind of a perfect cookbook for the pandemic, was that like if there was ever a cookbook you had that really encouraged um, the reader to connect with you specifically, like it's this one,
Mm.
in a time where we're having to find new ways to connect that are not just being in each other's faces. So why now?
Yeah.
Like, what made you
Why
want to
now?
write about yourself so much right now?
Yeah. I just have to tell you how much that means to me, coming from you, who, you do this so often and you do it so well, and it is so vulnerable. And um, I think sometimes we take that for granted from writers like you who do it often, because that's like what you do, right? And so having had this experience of including it, more of that in this book. And what you're referring to, which, I know everyone listening, so the book comes out officially tomorrow. So I know not everyone like has it or anything. So what you're referring to, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a handful of essays in this book, which is not something I've done in my previous cookbooks. And my previous cookbooks have definitely been personal. These are my favorite foods. Here's the stories behind them. This is, my dad's recipe, on and on. But I wouldn't say those books are as vulnerable. And that's because the essays in Simply Julia talk about things like, cooking and anxiety and the intersection of those two. There's the essay that I'm happiest is in the book, that I'm also honestly like a little scared that's in the book, but I'm thrilled it's in the book, is one that just reflects very honestly about body image and kind of like untangling myself from diet culture. And
that's my favorite one.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's really, and it's the most vulnerable, right? That's why it's like a little scary, but that is also why it feels like, put it out there. Like, this is important. That means a lot to me to know it's your favorite one. It's my favorite one too. And because I think I don't know, I feel, well, answer your first question about the timing, and then I'll tell you why it's my favorite. So in terms of timing, a few things. One, this isn't my first cookbook. And I think that in my previous books, I'm very lucky to say that. I say that so quickly, like no big deal. Like, that's a big deal. I've gotten to do this a few times. And I feel like in my earlier work, I felt this big desire to, or need or something to prove myself and to prove my worthiness. A lot of pressure I was putting on myself, other people weren't putting on me. But I wanted to make a book that looked like the books I loved when I was growing up. I was pulling from all these other outer things while I was trying to pull from kind of inner stuff. And so I feel like with this book, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to be really honest. And that comes with a lot of privilege because I've gotten to put out other work before. So I've gotten to kind of get out of my way a little bit, and I think work through some ego stuff, even though this is so personal. So it's like about me, but it's also not. Like, I'm sharing this stuff to try and make others feel less alone in some of these very isolating feelings. So it's about me, because I think when we're vulnerable and we share ourselves, that actually creates that connection. I mean, you know this better than anyone. That becomes not about you, and it becomes about relationships with other people and their relationships with other people. So I think that's kind of some of it. I think some of it is, just time and getting a little bit older. And, I've been through so much more therapy since my first books. I've been married longer, and my marriage is the center of my life. And it's just, I feel like Grace and I are in this unending dialogue where we are always talking about what we're feeling and what we're going through, and having that daily reflection on feelings and emotions and food. Food is part of our daily life. It's just, I feel different than I felt, and I've had the opportunity to kind of mark these changes over the years in my different books. And in terms of the worthiness of our bodies essay, the one that kind of tackles body image and stuff, it's my favorite for this reason, because it is the most honest, the most vulnerable. And I spent most of my life just completely embedded in diet culture. I thought for so long to be healthy meant to be thin. I equated healthy and skinny. I thought they were the same. I didn't know there were other options. And I was always so in love with cooking, but very not with eating. I was scared of it, and I felt guilty, and I felt a lot of shame over my body and my consumption. And untangling all that has been like the most liberating thing in my life. And it's something I continue to do. I'm not like an authority on this by any means. I'm just willing to be honest about it. And I feel like I used to feel a lot lonelier in these feelings. I felt very isolated. And that's why it's my favorite essay, because in sharing it, it makes me feel less lonely. I get to talk to people about it in this way that feels incredibly healing and important. And, to me, it's just as important as the recipes, if not more so. Come for the recipes, stay for the essays, vice versa, whatever you want.
Right. Both, in my opinion. Both. So how do we, this is one of the things that I got from your book that I really, really adored, but felt like I wanted to hear from you now, like
Mhm.
a year after, like you've turned in this book, like after the pandemic. Like, I mean, well, not really after, we're still in it, but we're not going to think about that too hard.
That like sounded so good.
I know. It's like after, then it's like, oh, wait,
Oh
okay.
no. Yeah.
Um, how do you I'm trying to think the best way to say this. How do we feed ourselves in a way that encourages us to connect to ourselves
Mhm.
instead of disconnect from ourselves? Because
Mhm.
I remember the first time I realized that, like, with food and my body and things like that, that exploration was going to be a lot more fun than deprivation,
Mm.
and was going to lead me to a lot more knowledge about what actually feels good to my body than just like constantly chopping
Mhm.
things out.
Yeah.
But what do you think, like, we need to be doing most of all to be sort of like keeping that connection to ourselves strong?
Sure. I think that one answer does not apply to everyone.
Right.
I think in general, the idea of, what is healthy, like what makes us feel good, what makes us feel connected, you know, every, ooh, a reminder just popped up, sorry. Um, um, I think those answers are different for all of us, and I encourage all of us to find out what those answers are. But what I can share is what I do to feel that sense of connection. And I think what you're referring to, or at least what I'm hearing when you're asking this question, is a question about intuitive eating, which
Mm-hmm.
um, is like a thing, like capital I, capital E. There's like an amazing book written by these two registered dietitians that has had many editions, and they keep updating it in a way that I really admire. They're very honest about like understanding they didn't know everything and
Mm-hmm.
they still don't. And I think that's very admirable in any work.
I agree.
So like their newest edition includes more about like systemic racism and how that affects diet culture and stuff, like important stuff. So what I understand about intuitive eating, again, I'm not an expert, I'm not trained in it, but I'm someone who's very curious about it, and I've responded very well to it. And by that, I mean exploring it has improved my relationship with myself and my body.
Right.
And my understanding is, we are born with a lot of intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Babies and infants like eat as much as they need, and then they kind of push the, bottle or whatever out of the way, or the spoon. And when they've had enough and when they're hungry, they let you know. And those things are like embedded in us, they're innate to us. And then we enter a world full of commercials and advertisements and cookbooks and all different types
Yes.
of media and magazines
Yes.
that tell us essentially like the less size you take up in the world, the more valuable you are. And that is just not true. And um, the advertising powers of food and grocery stores and stuff. I mean, it's overwhelming. And I think we just basically spend so much time getting further and further away from these intuitive ideas of what we want. And so for me, and they outline in their books, and there's wonderful practitioners of this, like across the country. There are podcasts I've listened to that have been deeply transformative for me. I'll shout out two, if that's okay, because
Yes,
I write
please.
I write recipes, so like I'm like, what's the tangible takeaway? So there's the Food Heaven podcast hosted by Wendy and Jess, who are two um, Black women who are registered dietitians, which like the registered dietitian world is extremely white. So their show is, I think, just through a different lens and very valuable to hear. And there's a podcast called Maintenance Phase, hosted by Aubrey Gordon and Michael Hobbs. And Aubrey, who wrote the amazing book, What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat. And their whole podcast is like debunking things like Snackwell cookies and The Biggest
I
Loser
was
and
just
stuff.
about to
And
say Snackwells, the Snackwells episode.
yeah, you like say the word Snackwells and everyone has a story and like a reaction. So, these types of podcasts and books are just providing like incredible information and just resources. So those types of things, basically, putting different voices in my ears, like changing who I listen to, hugely transformative. Changing or just increasing who I follow on social media, hugely transformative. Reading different books, to me, it's kind of like learning a new language, and the best thing is to immerse yourself in it. And I've changed the way I talk with my family and with friends, and I've set up boundaries in certain conversations, and those things. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort, and it's incredibly worth it. And doing all of that, notice I've said nothing about what I'm cooking or eating. It's like changing all these things about what I know and what I feel, and knowing that there is a life that is possible where I have no, it's not even feeling good about my body. I just don't have judgment about it, and I'm not judging other people. And I'm understanding how this fits into a greater whole. But in terms of intuitive eating, or just listening to oneself, feeling deeply connected to oneself, I found it really hard to go from, I was on and off of Weight Watchers for like over a decade. Like I was counting everything. I still have trouble not doing the math. Like it becomes so ingrained. And I started favoring things that, were worth less, which even just saying that, I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy. Right. And so not even being in touch with whether I'm hungry or not, but just asking myself, like, what do you want? Like, that's a really wonderful question to ask yourself, like, regularly, and to take the time to check in. And like, I have a hard time with this, but I'm just trying to take my time and figure it out, and just, ask yourself, like, sweet or salty? Do you want something crunchy right now? Do you need something refreshing right now? And to check in with myself when I'm eating. So I guess it's all kind of like a mindfulness type of thing, but not in a way that's, I don't know, sometimes you say that word and it can feel, at least to me, like a little off-putting. And I think just being really in touch with yourself, which for me requires deepening my trust with myself. Like I trust that I know what I want. I just have to listen.
That is such a huge thing that I think people don't understand, that trusting yourself is a practice, and that you can spend a lot of time practicing the opposite. Like you can spend most of your life being a person who is like slowly breaking down your trust in yourself.
Yeah.
And then one day you need it, and you know that you need it, but you just don't have like the resource there. You don't have the practice, and you wonder what's wrong with me. And it's like, nothing's really wrong with you. It's just that, for a long time you thought, if I have as few needs as possible, then I can be small enough to fit into somebody else's life really easily.
Oh yeah.
And it just doesn't actually work that way.
Yeah.
Like, because you need to be able to trust yourself, and they need to be able to trust you too. It's
absolutely lot. I think like also like following the money can be a helpful thing. Like who is profiting off of me not trusting myself? Because often there's quite a few people at the end of that exchange. Like, I'd rather keep my money and eat what I want. So
okay. First of all, yes, we're on the same page about that. Second of all, that brings me to another thing I want to talk about, because a recurring theme in your work, in your life, is like the fight for equality, for parity, for equal rights, for people to have equal access, especially to having their basic needs met. I just know that like your values are something that you wear on your sleeve. Not just obviously, like I said, in your work, but also in your personal life and how you choose to live it. One of the things that I think I started to learn from paying more attention to the food space is that lineage of our food, and being concerned not just with necessarily where our food came from, but every person who touched it along the way. And like, what did they get from that? Essentially, like, what are their lives like? Because if I'm benefiting from their labor, I should care about the state of their lives. How do we, can you explain to people who don't understand why that's so important?
Sure.
Why it is?
I mean, I think in what you just shared and asking the question, you explained it. I think there's people at every step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And, our food, I don't know, this is a huge, huge thing.
It is.
As you mentioned, it's something that I try to incorporate, not just in my work, but in my life. Again, not an expert, just someone who's engaged and
Mm-hmm.
just trying and learning all the time. And what I've learned in, this time or these various experiences is that these things are big and they're complicated, but they're not too complicated to just get involved with. And for me, all of the things that really scare me about the world, about the state of the world, which is everything from, you know, racism and the legacy of white supremacy or the presence of it, and climate just crisis, and on and on and on. These issues, which are huge, which are, you know, requiring an immediate response, like now,
Mm-hmm.
like we shouldn't be on Zoom. No, we
Right.
should. This is important,
Right.
because it's important to talk about this stuff. But all of these issues, to me, just as an individual, as a person, I often feel overwhelmed. But when I think about them through the lens of food, they make sense to me. Like when I hear numbers in the news about this or that, if I think about how does this apply to food, it just makes sense to me. So the climate, for example, like the wildfires in California that just get worse and worse. And you think about who's putting out those fires. They're often people who are incarcerated, who is having to continue to go to work while these fires are blazing. They're often farmers, and it's like, so you can buy, I don't know, an artichoke or like
Mm-hmm.
oranges at the store or avocados or something. This affects us whether we know it or not. And there's people at every step of the way. So if I think through what it took I'm looking at my counter, there's bananas here. Bananas don't grow in the Hudson Valley where I live in, March 1st. Like this didn't come from my area. So when I think about what it took for this banana to get to my counter, I can imagine the people along the way, and therefore I can imagine the humanity along the way and what's happening and what's not happening. And I think food also gives us so many opportunities to get involved. And I think when problems are happening everywhere, when oppression is happening everywhere, and inequality and inequity are happening everywhere, like the response has to come from everywhere. Like I think there's often this, I don't know, desire for there to be like, what's the answer, or what's the
Mm-hmm.
bullet point list or something. And it's like, no, we need like all the answers, all the bullet points all the time. So I think when we think about, for me, I just try to think about, I think about a lot of things, but I feel most useful, which is a feeling I enjoy feeling. I feel most useful when I think about my zip code and what is going on here, what's going on with the people in the houses that I can see from my window. And I feel useful there. And I also remember at any point I could be the one in need of their support, which has been very true over the course of the last year. Like today, I opened our door and our neighbor across the street, they got chickens during the pandemic, and
Yeah.
there's a dozen beautiful eggs waiting for us because they had too many. Like, do we need that? No. Do we appreciate it? Absolutely. Will I bake something with those eggs and drop it off? Yes, because it feels good and it feels useful, and it feels like
Right.
you're not alone. We're looking out for each other. And yeah, the issues are bigger than the exchange of eggs and baked goods. But I think, I don't know, I really like that sentiment of remembering we're kind of all each other's neighbors. And that sounds really cheesy, but I think it's a
I
good way
don't
to
think
navigate this.
so.
Yeah. Well,
I
I
don't think
appreciate
it's
that.
really that cheesy. I love it. I mean, being part of a community, in my mind, compassion, the things that we want to see most in the world, we start by giving those things to ourselves. And then it branches out into
100%.
like our loved ones and into our communities. And so, like, it's all an exchange. Like, every
Yeah.
time, they give you some eggs, you bake something nice. It's like, what's the real price of a lovely exchange
Mm.
just between community members?
Hmm.
Like, that's a beautiful thing, and not a lot of people get to encounter it, I don't
Yeah.
think, or at least not enough. Which reminds me, one of the things that I loved as soon as I was, and this is still in the intro that I loved in your book, was when you said that, these were meals that don't try to wow you, but hug you. And I wondered, what are 3 foods to you that feel like a hug?
I love that question. Yeah, I included that because I just think there's, in the age of Instagram and everything, like in the age of beautiful cookbooks, I think there's this feeling of like food has to be really expensive or beautiful or
Right.
impressive or something. And the last thing I want to feel when I'm eating is like impressed.
Right.
Like I just want to feel comforted. So, okay, 3 things that feel like a hug.
Yes.
Um, Matzo ball soup,
Mm.
um, a soft serve ice cream cone, vanilla chocolate twist, um, and a third thing. Let me look at my cabinet. I think hot buttered rice.
Ooh.
So good.
I like hot buttered rice with chicken or pork
Yeah.
chops or really anything reminds me of my grandma.
Yeah.
And
Like
I
buttery,
think,
salty rice.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Ooh, I haven't had. Now I'm looking, rubbing my belly a little. I'm like, oh, I ain't had that in a while. Okay, I have just a couple more questions for you, and then we're going to get into some audience questions.
That
So,
sounds great.
audience members, if you've got your questions, be putting them in the Q&A, so that we can get to those in just a bit. So these are just I have three quick more questions. So these are quick ones. The first one is, why are toaster ovens the best thing ever? Because I also got a toaster oven. Like you've had yours probably longer than me, but I got a toaster oven, this Cuisinart toaster oven, during the pandemic, and that it's my favorite thing in my kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why didn't I have a toaster oven?
I mean, that I can't answer, but I can tell you why I love them.
Why? Tell me why you love them.
I think the reason some people avoid them is because they do take up counter space, which is
They do.
very valuable real estate. But now that you live in Indianapolis, I think you have more space. You can have the toaster oven. But toaster ovens are amazing because 1, they take no time to heat up versus your big oven. 2, if you're not cooking a ton of food, it just fits in there. 3, incredibly versatile. Like it can make your toast and it can melt cheese on it too. And it's great. I use mine every day. I also just got an air fryer and I'm like into it, but it really is just like another toaster oven.
It's another toaster oven.
Yeah.
I was
Anyway,
looking for
that
an
wasn't
air
your
fryer.
question. Yeah.
But I was looking for an air fryer when I got the toaster oven because I was like, I think I actually just want a toaster oven.
If I had to choose one, toaster oven.
Yes. Yes.
1,000%.
That's what I'm sticking with. I love it so much. Second question, why Rancho Gordo beans?
Rancho Gordo beans. I wish I had a bag right here to show you. Rancho Gordo beans, if you're not familiar with them, I feel like if you're tuning in to hearing about a cookbook on a Monday night, you probably are familiar with them. But if you're not, it is a company that is California based. They sell dried, like heirloom beans, which might sound pretentious, but it's not. It's like really, I mean, maybe it is, but that's okay. They're worth it. They're the best beans, but also preserving these different varieties of beans is incredibly important because beans represent so many different cultures. They're also delicious. They're affordable. They last forever in your pantry. They're extremely good for you. They're full of fiber and protein and all those things, but they also just taste really good. And you can make a million different things. Like you can make a pot of just plain beans, and then one night you stir them into your soup, and then one night you make a yummy dip, and one night you make bean tacos, and like they will just serve you and serve you and serve you. And it's a wonderful ingredient. It's a wonderful company. And they also make my favorite popcorn. Or they don't make it, they sell it. But yeah, really good.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite popcorn is Movie. I think that's my favorite.
I heard Grace laughing. So.
Okay, I might stop. If I didn't make Grace laugh, I might be done because I like to end on a high note. No, okay, one more question.
One
and then
more.
We'll get to audience questions.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody grabs this cookbook, who do you want them to be cooking for?
I think first and foremost themselves. I think, yeah. And I think whoever in their life they want to let that person know that they're thinking about them,
Mm.
whoever that is.
I love that. I love that. Okay, Julia, thank you so much again for
Ashley,
conversation with me.
I just, to be asked questions by you, which means you've spent time with the work and thinking about it and forming questions, which you are the best person at doing. It just means so much to me. This has been, I've tried to act real cool, but I'm like quietly freaking out a little. Thank you very much.
Stop it. I miss you. I'll see you soon. Michael, answer these people's questions. They've been waiting.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Thank you, Julia, too. Just in case anybody's out there still doesn't know how to work the Q&A, you'll see a Q&A button on your screen, and you can submit your questions there. We already have a few listed here, so I'm just gonna work my way through these. First up is a question from Jay, who asks, what message would you have for your younger self about what it means to be healthy?
My message would be what I got to say to Ashley earlier, which is just healthy and skinny are not the same thing. And it's really important that you get that.
Yeah.
Can I ask Ashley to answer that? Is that okay? I would love to know what you think.
What was the question again? I don't think I heard. No, I'm just kidding. No, actually ask the question again. So I want to make sure I do it right.
Okay. What message would you have for your younger self about what it means to be healthy?
Oh, I think there are two things I would tell myself. One is that being ill is a circumstance, not a burden. And I think I would also tell myself that healthy is a feeling and not a look. Which is very close to what Julia said. Like I thought I had to look a certain way. I was definitely trying to get a 6-pack. Should have been happy with what I had. Let's be honest. Still happy, by the way. Very sexy over here.
I saw your underwear ads.
Known underwear model. Just saying. Okay, continue.
Thank you for answering that. Thank you.
So our next question comes from Randy. Julia and Ashley, thank you for your thoughts this evening. Julia, 2 questions. 1, is that snow falling where you are? And 2, what's one of the most memorable meals that you've had that you didn't prepare?
I realize you're seeing snow fall in this reflection. That's our grill. That's our gas grill, which I wrote another essay about in the book. So yes, the snow is falling. A memorable meal I've had that I didn't prepare. Oh gosh. I mean, so many. And I would say the most recent one was this morning when my wife Grace made us breakfast quesadillas, which are quesadillas with scrambled eggs in them. So good, with some leftover collard greens we had. And I've just been a little, I don't know, frantic because this book is coming out tomorrow and I'm trying to answer emails and be super present and enjoy it, but also like it's nerve-wracking, but it's great. And I'm a little all over the place and I'm like maybe not the best listener at the moment, and to both myself and my wife. And this morning she just put this plate in front of me and it was so delicious and it was just what I wanted. And we got to sit there and eat together and I felt very taken care of.
Absolutely. A well-placed quesadilla is you can't overstate it. There was one time, not to be the person who butts in here, but one time my girlfriend made the perfect pesto grilled cheese sandwich at like the perfect, like most stressed out time in my life. And I will never top that sandwich ever, you know? Okay, so our next question.
I know. I get it.
Our next question comes from Melanie. Melanie says, I feel lucky to have avoided diet culture and many kinds of negative thoughts about my body as a young person, but I find myself struggling with it more now because I live with a partner who has been receiving body shaming messages and has been steeped in diet culture by his mother, my future mother-in-law. Do you have any advice about maintaining balance in my own thoughts about my body and ideally helping to move my partner into a kinder and less punitive relationship with his body? I'm at the point where I worry about what my hypothetical future children would absorb from being around their father and grandmother and would like to disrupt that generational transfer of shame.
This is like such, I really appreciate everything. It's Melanie, you said? Everything Melanie shared in asking this question, this was very honest. And I don't know if she wants to come in the room. I know she's listening. Grace, my wife, would be way more equipped to answer this, because I think I was very much the other person that you're describing more than you. And I just, I appreciate the compassion that is going in so many directions in this question for him, for you, for the mother-in-law. I mean, I can just share what Grace has done for me repeatedly over the years, which is just remind me of a lot of the things Ashley just said, that like healthy is not a look, it's a feeling. I think, you know, reminding me that I am loved and desired by her, and that goes both ways. So trying to think about how she sees me, and that's been very helpful for me. And I think with all these relationships, I mean, in-law relationships in general are complicated. I mean, it can be wonderful, but you know, I think the stereotype of how complicated they are comes from the fact that they're complicated. And I think establishing really clear and direct communication and boundaries within those relationships, which doesn't have to be like a confrontational thing, and it can come from a place of like, you know, just a lot of love and compassion. And I would recommend for Melanie's partner to also, if he's ready for it, because I mean, I don't know, but to seek out a therapist who has a lot of experience with either eating disorders or disordered eating. I'm not saying he's had these things, but someone who's trained in that kind of stuff. I'm currently working with a therapist who bills herself as a body justice therapist, and it's been amazing. And to talk to someone who is really equipped to let you know how these things that are challenges for us, I'll include myself, how these fit into other things, and just help you just clarify them outside of your relationship. Because I think what Melanie's talking about here too is something that can be a little treacherous, which is like being, you know, no single person can be everything for anyone. And I think making sure that he's getting the support he needs and you're not providing the support alone, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're running a little short of time, but I wanted to get through one more question. And speaking of Grace, there was a question had to do with Grace from Andrea. Does Grace have a favorite recipe in the book? If so, what is it?
Grace, I know you're listening, so correct me if I'm wrong, but there's let me show you. Can I show you? So here's a book, by the way, that's it. That's me. And there's a breakfast chapter in the book. She's confirming. I just heard her shout. I don't know if you can hear that. There's a recipe for these. I have headphones in. You can't see because of my hair. Sorry, I'm slipping. I know we're out of time. This is so nerve-wracking. Okay.
Don't worry about it.
These are everything bagel hand pies. So this is, I'll show you another photo step by step. So you make this dough, which is, I did half all-purpose flour and half whole wheat flour. You can use all-purpose, whatever. And yogurt and like a little salt and baking soda. That's it. You mix it. It's very easy to work with. You roll it out. You fill it with scrambled eggs and some scallions. If you don't have the scallions, skip it. No big deal. I just really love scallion cream cheese, so that's where that came from. And then you fold them over like kind of like calzones or empanadas, and you brush them with a little egg and sprinkle them with everything bagel seasoning, which you can buy, or you can just use sesame seeds or nothing, salt, whatever. And then you bake them, and then you get these like wonderful little, basically it's a Hot Pocket. It's a Hot Pocket. That's what it is. And those are Grace's favorite things.
Yeah.
Can I just say really quickly that my favorite everything bagel seasoning is from Oaktown in Oakland. It's my favorite one, and I think it's probably perfect for those.
That's an excellent recommendation. They're a wonderful company. Thank you for mentioning them.
Look at me offering relevant information. I feel so dope.